Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Hello and welcome to the show. On tonight's Where Did the Road Go, we're going to be talking with John Lordan of Lordan Arts, the YouTube channel Lordan Arts. And I had referred to him back in the first Steph Young interview and mistakenly said that the channel was Green Dorks, and it was GeekendorX at the time. Now it's Lordan Arts, but you can find it by searching for Lordan Arts or GeekendorX, either one. And Lordan Arts is Lordan Arts, A-R-T-S, one word. He does a series called Brainscratch. We talk all about this in an interview a little bit. Well worth checking out. Go check out his YouTube channel. And there will be an extra segment with him for patrons. All right. Also for patrons, coming up, a bunch of you have thrown us some questions, and we're going to do a patrons-only sort of answer your questions show, because if you are a patron and you haven't seen the post, you can ask us anything, any of the roundtable guests that we have on normally, and we will get to all those questions sometime very soon, probably. A few good topics have been thrown out for regular shows that we're gonna turn into subjects for regular shows at some point in the very near future as well. If you want to become a patron, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's in the upper right, and it's only $3 a month. You get some extra content. You get multi-part interviews all at once, assuming I record them all at once, and a few extras here and there. Working on more and more stuff for patrons as I can. And I want to thank everyone who is a patron, everyone who has donated, everyone who listens. Thank you so much. The response to this show has been overwhelming. I try to respond to as many people as possible. If you have written me and I did not get back to you, so if it's something you really need a response to, write me again, because sometimes I just get overwhelmed. I do have a bunch of stories that I need to get back to people on. We're going to be probably doing something with Steve Stockton where we do maybe a story a week type of thing. So if you have stories, feel free to submit them. Do not think I'm ignoring you, because I am not. They're piling up in my stories mailbox, but it's stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com, and I got some really interesting stuff we're going to talk about at some point, hopefully very soon. We're also going to be doing that movie podcast, and initially I was going to do the movie podcast as a separate podcast, but I think instead we're going to do it as part of Where Did the Road Go, and kind of do what we did with Stranger Things, where we take it apart. And we may just review some good movies here and there as well on the more independent level. And I also want to give special thanks to Philip for a very generous donation to the show. All right, without any further ado, here's my talk with John Lordan. All right, and I am talking with John Lordan, and you are the host of a YouTube channel that works on, well, you do a bunch of different stuff on the channel, don't you? You do missing cases and some weird unexplained stuff, and why don't you tell people a little bit about it and what it's called and why you changed the name?
Sure, yeah. My channel is now called Lordan Arts, which is just my last name, Lordan, with the name Arts after it. I changed it because my channel was formerly called GeekendorX, and it was spelt in kind of a weird way. And quite honestly, whenever people would refer to it, they would get the name incorrect, and it was a bit hard for people to find. But the easiest way to find me is to search on my show Brainscratch, and that is a show where I basically look into cases that are odd occurrences, things that are not quite fully explained. Sometimes that is a murder mystery, sometimes, especially at the start, that would be a missing persons case. And as my channel grew and I got more viewers, I split off the missing persons cases into another show called Brainscratch Searchlight. And recently I've added a third Brainscratch themed show, which is Case Cracked. And basically I just wanted to do a show where I could also talk about cases where we actually knew the outcome and talk about how those things were figured out.
Okay. And how did you get interested in this stuff?
I've always just been interested in these true crime stories, America's Most Wanted, all those great shows that we had in the 90s that were looking into this, unsolved mysteries. Those shows, I mean, now we've got a few cable networks that kind of go into shows like that as well. But I always found that there was this angle of being a bit more journalistic and maybe unbiased and a little more logic approached, particularly for the YouTube audience, because there's a lot of channels on YouTube that tell these kind of scary or spooky stories, and they do it in a very dramatized fashion. And I just wanted to bring kind of a more open dialogue to these cases, try to get to the facts in a bit of a clearer way, share them with my audience, and really use that as a test for what I was saying. I always say on Brainscratch that it's the start of a conversation. If I do an episode on something and I'm completely off base or my information is bad, my audience lets me know about that. And then I will do a follow-up episode and make clarifications, and we'll kind of adjust, where I'm heading with each topic. And that is really what happened with this case of Elisa Lam in particular, and led to, I think there's now 15 different videos that I've created just on this case specifically.
Yeah, and they're fairly lengthy videos as well.
Yeah, and that was, these are some of my earlier brain scratches, and my methodology and the way that I put them together has changed a little bit as I've been doing this show. I'm using a little bit more editing nowadays, but they're still coming out somewhere in the 30 to 40 minute range. And what's crazy is I have so many viewers that tell me, "Hey, John, we wish these were longer."
Well, that's because you're putting out a lot of. I mean, it's not fluff. You got solid information that entire time.
Yeah, and that is really the challenge, is to do enough research before I fire up the camera, so that when I'm talking to them, they know that it's coming from a good place. And we go over the research, and that's something that has developed also. In my early videos, I would just use kind of a zoomed close-up from my camera of my computer screen, and the quality was really bad. And I've changed the game now where I'm using actual screen captures from my computer for that stuff. But people even tell me that as they're going through the research with me, sometimes they'll click on the screen and try to scroll down the page that I'm on, which is a huge compliment, because I want them to do that. I want them to come along this ride with me and look at the research. And as a matter of fact, on my videos, I always put the links for the research that I've done in the description box, so that they can go after the fact, go to those websites for themselves and check it out.
Yeah, you're definitely trying to get down to the core data, and I wish more people did that, honestly. You don't have an agenda that you're trying to push here.
No, my agenda is to simply look into a case, get to a point of understanding about that, share it with my audience, and then sometimes they modify that point of understanding, and I need to reshare the new point of view. And we keep working that way towards a better conclusion. It's pretty interesting because just for this case today, I took a look at the Wikipedia page again, and I haven't looked at it in several months. And it kind of works in the same fashion. I got to say, I'm pretty impressed at how the Wikipedia page has been updated with more current information. Things that used to be on there that weren't quite correct have been removed. And that's kind of how my mentality works as well. I think there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, this is my belief at this time."
Right.
It's just I like to remind people that, but my mind is still open, and that could be changed. I just need better information. And if you have that, let me know where it is, and let's check it out together.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important to question your own beliefs fairly regularly.
Yes.
Otherwise,
yes.
you end up just kind of stuck down the wrong road without willing to consider that, hey, maybe it's the wrong road.
Yeah, and you'll wind up laying your beliefs on everything you're looking at, and that is certainly not fair to some of these cases. These are people's lives. These are real experiences that we're looking into, and that's another thing that I like about my format, is just I think that it brings more respect to these cases than telling it in some type of creepypasta storytelling fashion.
Absolutely. But you also do some other stuff too, don't you? Do some reviews and stuff on your page?
Yeah. I have been. When my page first started, I was kind of into geek culture, and I had like video game reviews and sci-fi TV shows and stuff like that. But as Brainscratch became more popular, I've really been pushing the content towards more of the mystery vein. And what I've got it down to now is basically Mondays are Case Cracked, Tuesdays are a Johnny vlog, which is just me firing up the camera and talking about whatever's on the top of my head. Usually some type of interesting issue. Sometimes we'll talk about justice or the afterlife. Do those things really exist? Bigfoot sightings, new ghost pictures, things like that kind of push the fringe a little bit. Wednesday, we do a Searchlight, which is a profile on a missing person. Thursday, we have a show that I've recently renamed to Itchy Mysteries, which is essentially a straight-up movie review show, but in particular, I'm looking at documentaries that are mystery-related. And then Fridays are the regular full-blown Brainscratch, which goes in all kinds of different directions at this point. I like sometimes pushing into the fringe. Sometimes it's just an unsolved murder case. Kind of depends on what the audience is asking for.
Nice. All right. Well, let's talk about Elisa Lam. And she, of course, came into popularity on the internet when the elevator footage came out. Was it shortly after she was found?
Yeah, and I've actually got some new information on that only recently. But she came to California on January 26th of 2013. And then she checked into the Cecil Hotel in the downtown LA area. It's in a part of town that used to be pretty bad. It was known as the Skid Row area of town, but it's recently going through a bunch of changes, and it's becoming a little bit of a more hip community nowadays. But she checked in there, and a couple days after that, she went missing. And through that, the LAPD got involved very quickly because she was an international traveler. She was a student from Canada that was coming to California. She specifically wanted to go to San Diego. She went to the zoo there, and she was kind of traveling north on her way to Santa Cruz. There's still some question about, was she planning on stopping in LA? Because some information I've seen alludes to that her family did not know that she was going to stop in the Los Angeles area. But she did wind up stopping there, unfortunately. A few weeks after her disappearance, I believe is when the video came out, around February 14th of 2013. And this is a week after the LAPD had a big press conference. They had her family at the press conference asking for the public's help. And a reporter for the LA Weekly named Dennis Romero is actually the first person that got the footage. He got it directly from the media relations department at the LAPD. And I don't know if they were asking him for help or if he asked for permission, but he is the first one to have posted that video on YouTube. And that's when things just got crazy. The video basically goes viral, not only here, but in China. Because of the kind of strange nature of the video.
Yeah, and you did at least one video just on that video, taking it apart and stuff, and it was slowed down, wasn't it?
Yeah. A YouTuber named Cody Fry did some analysis on the video as well. The first thing you notice about the video is the time code. For some reason, the time code has been damaged on the video, so you can't tell the date or the hour or the minutes of the time code. But it's been damaged in a very odd way, and I still have not found a reasonable explanation for that. I've heard all kinds of different theories, nothing I could really confirm. But as far as, I've reviewed many cases at this point and have seen a lot of security footage. I've never seen security footage with a time code so badly damaged as this one. So the first question is that time code footage being obscured for some reason? And if so, why did they do it in such a weak way? They probably could have really cropped all of that out if they just would have zoomed in on the picture a little bit. But outside of that, the footage has been slowed down, which there was some analysis done on the millisecond timer, because you can at least see when it's changing. You can't really tell what the characters are, but you can see how often it's changing. And someone used that to set it correctly and sped it back up approximately 33%, if I remember correctly. So on top of the time code, you have it being slowed down. There are a few edits that another analyst found in the footage where he believes that someone literally clipped out 54 seconds of the footage and then a few seconds in two other places. So there's just a lot of questions around why is the footage being presented in this manner? Even in terms of it being an investigative tool, I mean, it was released to the public to help find. She was a missing person at that time. It was released as a tool to help find Elisa, but the footage is horrible. It's horrible quality. You really can't make out her features. At best, you can get some idea of the clothing that she was wearing, but it's also from inside the hotel. It's from inside of an elevator, so we can't really tell where she's going. We know that she's on a different floor than she was registered to. She winds up getting off of the elevator on the 14th floor, which has raised a whole bunch of questions for many people. A lot of people think she might have been on some type of investigation of her own, because the 14th floor is kind of infamous for being the floor that Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived at while he conducted several murders. And outside of that, of course, you have the actions that she's doing while she's in the elevator. Some people look at the footage and think that she is scared, that she might be trying to get away from someone, that the elevator is malfunctioning. She's hitting several different buttons for floors and it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. She kind of whips her head outside of the elevator and looks in both directions, kind of like she's worried that someone's coming after her. But then she keeps blocking the door to the elevator, stopping it from going anywhere. She steps outside of the elevator and it looks like she might be talking to someone, and she does some pretty interesting hand movements that seems to bother a lot of people, just the manner of which, how she's speaking and how she's using her hands. And I can also tell you that there is a mirror in that hallway that is directly across from the elevator door. And I don't know if she is talking to someone that's there or if she's talking to herself in the mirror. I still have a bit of a question about that. There is a moment in the footage where it looks like there is another shoe that could potentially be coming in from the left side. And some people think that she was grabbed at that point because she leaves to the left in the footage at that time. But then another weird aspect is after she leaves the footage, the video continues for almost a full minute where she's not in it at all. And all that it shows is the elevator start operating normally. The doors close, it goes to another floor, and the doors open. Doors close again, goes to another floor, and the doors open. So just as a tool being put out there for the investigation, it's not great. It's been edited in a strange way. Possibly sections have been taken out. Time code has been busted up. When I first looked at it, I thought there was something to this, that someone was trying to evoke an emotional response, that someone wanted this to look creepy, particularly with slowing it down. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the footage and trace it back to how it got to the internet, it came directly from the LAPD. I asked Dennis himself. He told me he did not modify the footage in any way. That is literally how the file came to him. He posted the whole thing directly to the internet.
And why would anyone do that to the footage? That's just bizarre.
It's totally bizarre, and that's where a lot of theories came up. In the first video I did on this case, I was really coming from the aspect of wondering if this was real. Is this some type of Blair Witch type marketing job that is going on? I don't know if all of your viewers remember this, and it's funny that we had a new Blair Witch movie just come out, but when the first one came out, they had a ton of social media going. They had a website developed where they were claiming that this footage was actually real, that everything about this movie was actually real and had actually occurred. Yeah. And the public bought into it, and that was a big part of the reason for its success. At this point, when I first got into the Elisa case, I was wondering the same thing. Just, is this real? Does she really exist? She has social media that she has left all over the place. Seems like she struggled with depression quite a bit. She talks about, that she's going to go ahead and take this trip. She's struggling to take her classes. She feels bad, like she's letting down her professors. But if you look through all her social media, you don't see a whole lot of pictures of her posted of herself. You see a lot of her shoes, but none of her face really. It really could have been faked. And that was kind of, by the end of the first video, I was just coming to the conclusion that if I was producing something, how hard would it be for me to fake all this? This would be relatively easy for me to make up this character of Elisa Lam, and possibly to even stage her body being recovered from the water tank up on the roof, which is what eventually happened on February 19th of 2013. And, you know, basically the press was held across the street from there. If you had a team of actors dressed up as firefighters and you had access to a fire truck, you really could have faked a lot of what was going on there.
Yeah. And the way it was slowed down in her movements and stuff, I mean, it definitely comes across as a creepy video, which of course drew a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And because it's
I'd still say it's
Go on.
I'd still say it's probably the creepiest video on the internet. I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, take the 4.5 minutes and watch it for yourself. It comes up a lot in top 10 lists and top 5 lists, and I really haven't seen anything as compelling as it still to this day.
And it's also, because it's such low quality, you get a lot of pixelization, and that led to a lot of speculation that there were, you know, people seeing faces and stuff like that in some of the pixelization.
Yes.
And,
yeah, people see faces in the mist of the door. They think that the devil's face is there. They think Richard Ramirez's face is there. They think that her face has been pixelized, that it's actually not even Elisa Lam, but an actress that redid this for some reason, and they did some type of Hollywood effects job on it. And that's where the theories just start spinning and going in all these different directions. And one of them is the invisible light agency theory, which there was a very unfortunate thing about Google Maps where if you looked up the Cecil Hotel, there was one business registered called the Invisible Light Agency that looked like it was actually in the hotel. Its address was actually 2 buildings down from the hotel, but from a Google map, you couldn't tell the difference. It looked like it was literally inside the Cecil Hotel. Because of that, a lot of people have looked into that company, have looked into one person in particular in that company, and think maybe he had something to do with what happened to her. And that's just one of the many branches in this rabbit hole chase that goes on with this case.
And do you think there's any connection?
With that particular one, I found a couple things odd. The person that was being accused, I guess I'll just say his name's Anthony. People thought he might have been involved because he had a history of working at Raytheon, and she had mentioned in one of her later tweets about an invisible cloak technology, and she linked to an article about invisibility cloaks that were being developed for military use. Now, Elisa, if you look in her other social media, you can see she's a Harry Potter fan, so I personally think that was her motivation for being interested in the invisibility cloaks.
Sure.
People think that Anthony still works at Raytheon while he was working at ILA, but if you look at his LinkedIn profile, he doesn't add end dates to any of the companies he works for. So this thought that he was still working for this, company that specializes in some military gear doesn't really hold up for me. But what is interesting about Anthony is he does disappear from California about the time that all this happens to Elisa, and he actually winds up moving. I think he moved to Vietnam, if I remember correctly, and he stays off of social media for about 6 months after this occurrence. So I do find that one part of it still compelling. I would love to, to have an interview with him someday to maybe weed that out, but I'm sure he is running from this as far and fast as he can.
I'm sure.
There's been a few cases where people have, made associations with other people. One of them was a lead singer for kind of a death metal band, and he kind of played around with it at first. That, oh yeah, guys, I'm the one that did it, and then he did a huge back off when things got serious. He was looked into and ruled out. As a matter of fact, from what I can tell of LAPD's perspective on this, they don't think that this is a crime. They did initially suspect foul play because she was found in the water tower, And I can say I have seen other cases where water towers have been used to hide bodies after someone has been murdered. But they kind of reversed that a few weeks into their investigation, and they really haven't gone back on that since. Uh, it does support their point of view if you look at the autopsy report, which is publicly available. You can actually search Elisa Lam autopsy and read every page of it for yourself. There's no real markings done to her body that would lead you to believe that she was abused in any way or being tied up or anything like that. But there are some strange conditions about how she was found in the water tank. She was found nude. All of her clothes were in the tank with her. Her hotel card key was floating around in the water, as well as her watch, if I remember correctly. And it just makes you think, if this is someone that put themselves in this water tank for whatever reason, what motivates you to then take off all your clothes while you're in there? I'm really not sure.
Yeah, or to go in with your watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the death metal band?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can remember that off the top of my head. And I think he's changed it a couple times since. It wasn't one that was popular in particular, but I might be able to dig it up here. Yeah, I can't even recall his name off the top of my head right now.
That's okay. I was just curious. You mentioned in one of the videos that American Horror Stories creator was saying that he based the last American Horror Story on this case, but it doesn't seem to be any similarity there.
I did hear from some of my viewers that the 6th episode has a little bit of Elisa's story kind of woven into it. But I think he was really just looking to grab attention by mentioning this case. He didn't actually mention Elisa's name in particular, but whenever you talk about, I saw creepy footage from a downtown LA hotel in an elevator, everyone pretty much assumes that is Elisa Lam. Right. I did see some recent news about the film that was in development called The Bringing. And the newest news on that is Michael Pena has actually just been brought onto the cast to be the star in it. So it looks like that film actually might come about, and that is supposedly directly about the Elisa Lam story.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about her getting up there, and a lot of the initial stuff was there was no way she could get to the roof. She was found inside a locked water tower. And, of course, what you said with the clothes off and everything, and that her body was completely drained of blood. So that was the initial stuff I had heard. And then I think after I had Steph Young on the first time about this case, some people had said, well, they've actually been to that hotel, and there are fire escapes and stuff that you can get to the roof on, that you don't need to go through the main door. And you've been there, and you've verified this.
Yes, yeah. There are 3 fire escapes that you could take to get up there, and they are extremely easy to access. One of them you can get to from the hallway. You just walk to the end of the hallway, and there is a big giant window that on some days, if it's really warm in LA, they don't have air conditioning running through this hotel, so they will actually leave some of those windows open. And it is very easy to get to those stairs and take them to the roof. I always wondered about the feasibility of it because it's a staircase, like there's a platform you actually stand on and you walk up much like a traditional metal staircase on the side of a building, but the top level goes to just a ladder that you have to scale to get up to the top. And I always wondered, is a 21-year-old girl that normally wears glasses, who doesn't have her glasses with her, is she really going to do that in the middle of the night to get up on top of this building? Yeah. So I'm still not certain if she used the staircase. I saw some comments that came out from one of the detectives that looked into the case, where he plainly states they don't know how she got onto the roof. And I find that really odd, because if you're conducting an investigation up there, what's it going to take for you to maybe find some fingerprints of her using the stairs or getting on the tank somehow? They really have no idea of how she got into the water tank. And they searched the hotel with dogs while she was still missing, including the rooftop, and they did not locate her. And it was ultimately an employee that wound up finding her when people that were staying at the hotel were complaining about the water pressure and that there was a strange color and odor to the water that was coming out. The employee that found her says that the lid was actually off the tank, and he saw her floating face up, and that's how she was discovered. So that was another thing that was a bit of a point of contention when I first started looking into this case. Was the popular story was that the lid was on the tank, and if you get into an 8-foot tall water tank, how are you also going to put the lid back on the tank and close it? This lid in particular was not hinged, and there are actually four water tanks that are up there. 3 of them have hinges on their lids, but this one doesn't. It's literally just a big piece of metal square that fits over a lip to seal that up. And it's really unfortunate that it wasn't locked, that there was no type of locking mechanism, not only because of what happened to Elisa, but it just sounds like it's a bit of a security risk. It'd be very easy to taint the water supply at the Cecil Hotel, although now they have finally added some locks to all those tanks. So they've corrected that.
Honestly, it seems like something that they wouldn't even have thought about.
Yeah, and you're basically coming to the same conclusion that the court did. The family tried to sue the hotel for wrongful death specifically, and that was really the core issue. Is this something that the hotel could have foreseen? The only thing I didn't like about the ruling was the attorney for the hotel brought up that you couldn't just add a lock to that lid, that there was no way to do it because it wasn't hinged. If you added a lock on one side, you still wouldn't have it secured. The attorney for Elisa's family said, well, then how did you guys add a lock to it? Because we know that you've added a lock to it. So they kind of demonstrated that, yes, it could have been more secure, but they're saying that they really had no cause to understand that previous to her drowning in there. And the judge agreed with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's somewhat reasonable. You don't expect someone to climb up and jump into a water tank on the roof.
Yeah, and if you do consider that if there is someone looking to harm themselves and they have access to the roof, they're probably more likely to jump from the roof. And that was something that came up in the court case as well. They were saying, well, are you saying that we need to put up a fence all the way around the perimeter of the roof? So they definitely did talk about that. The Cecil does have a history of people actually jumping from it, although I haven't heard of one from the roof specifically. But as recently as June of 2015, they had someone that jumped out one of the windows there. So they certainly do have a history and a cause to maybe be a bit more secure with some of that stuff.
They and it's hard because if someone really wants to harm themselves, they're going to find a way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing about getting to the roof is what I think is probably the most likely way is there's an internal staircase that leads to the roof. And there's actually signs, even on the lower levels, about stairs lead to the roof. And those signs don't say that there is no access for people. When you do get to the final door before you would access the roof, there is an alarmed bar on it. And there are signs saying that, guests aren't supposed to access the roof up there. Now, I went to the Cecil with someone who was very brave, and he decided to try that alarmed door for himself. I was down in the lobby taking some shots while he was doing this. He came back down. He told me he opened it right up, and no alarm sounded. And I've mentioned that in my videos, and I've had messages from many people that live in the area who have also accessed the roof there as a normal course. Some of them just go hang out up there, and we know that because there's beer bottles and cigarette butts all over the roof up there.
And
many
graffiti.
people say, and tons of graffiti. So people say that alarmed door doesn't work.
Now, in the court document, I think he said he checked to make sure it was working and then disarmed it. But You
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
as you point out in the video, how does he know it was working if it didn't go off? I mean, even if it has a light on it or something that to indicate it's active, it doesn't mean it's actually working.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You would think that they would have to test that every now and then by setting it off. And they
Yeah.
did say in their documentation that it is extremely loud, that you could hear it all through the 15th and 14th floors, just the actual buzzing from the door. But on top of that, there is an alarm, like a wire that runs down to the desk, and there's an alarm that goes off down there as well. So I'd be very curious to see if that system was still working based on the information I've heard from my buddy that ran up there and tried it for himself and my audience, that alarm system is not very solid on that door. I have a feeling that that's probably the most likely way that she accessed the roof.
Yeah, probably just went through the door. It didn't go off. She continued.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Now, what prompts her to get up on top of the water tank after that? I have no idea. There is two routes that she could have done. There is a ladder that is actually kind of in between the tanks that is normally there, and she could have possibly climbed up on that ladder and lifted herself on top of the tank. And there is a building right next to the tanks, almost like a mechanical building. I don't know if it's for the elevator system or one of the other electrical systems up there, but there are ladders that you can get to the roof of that building, and then if you walk to the edge of that building, you could lower yourself down to the water tanks. It's a bit steep. I think it's probably a 5 or 6 foot drop from that ledge down to the water tanks, but she could have done it that way. But like I said, according to this very limited information we have seen from the detectives that worked the case, they don't know. They don't know what path she took to get up there.
Now, is that building something that's easy to climb on top of, though?
Yeah, because it has a ladder system literally strapped on the side of it.
Ah,
You could go
okay.
right up the ladder, right up to the top of it. But then, once again, I'm just trying to put myself in the mindset of a young college student traveling in a different city. I mean, you really have to have some guts to put yourself in these situations. Scaling the side of a building, without your glasses, going up on top of a building, on top of that building essentially, and then lowering yourself 5 or 6 feet to a water tank in the middle of the night. The
Yeah.
logic is very tough for me to follow on that.
The now the hatch we can only go with the information given, and the guy finding it did say the hatch was open.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and the police never investigated the water tanks.
Yeah, and that still baffles my mind to this day because from what I've seen, they actually searched the roof twice. And what do you search on the roof outside of the water tanks and that building that I mentioned? There is literally nothing else up there. There are some windows that lead down. There's a bunch of graffiti, like you had mentioned,
Yeah.
and there are four giant water tanks. It's literally it's the first thing you see as you get to the roof. So I don't know how they would have missed that, particularly if they were thinking that they were looking for a body, and knowing that the lid was off of it at that time. Once again, why didn't the dogs detect her? I have no idea.
Yeah, that is very strange. They should have picked something up.
I would have thought so. And I did some research into scent dogs. Apparently, the scent that they follow off of a human can be transferred extremely fast, like 1 to 2 seconds of contact. So if she is, scaling these numerous ladders, climbing around on these objects, I would think that she made enough contact to transfer her scent.
Now, I would think that maybe if someone had harmed her in some way, they could have put her in a bag or something like that and then brought her up to the roof, in which case the scent may not have traveled as easily.
Certainly, certainly, and that's definitely a consideration that has stuck with me since I started looking into this case. Now you have to figure she wasn't found with markings on her body. Is there some way that she could have been coaxed around that? If you're being threatened with a weapon and being told what to do, being told to disrobe or something along those lines, I do think that it was still feasible that there might have been some element of foul play there. despite them not finding any particular wounds to her suggesting that. But it is, yeah, you're right. I mean, if someone, put her in a carpet and rolled it up and, took her up to the roof or something like that, it would make sense that then there would be no trace evidence of her to be detected by the dogs or the police.
Now, they also could have drugged her because, I mean, she was in that tank for a long time. So there is stuff that may not have shown up so much later in time.
Yeah, and the coroner's report, and this is a bit of an interesting thing. I know you had David Paulides on recently, and he has really been pushing the fact about there being no blood in her body out there. Mm-hmm. I did some research into that, and the autopsy report does note that there is a limited amount of blood in her body and that their toxicology results might not be completely accurate because of that. But if you look into decomposition of bodies within water sources, it is not abnormal for the blood to break down and exit the body through the nose and mouth. So it's not as unexplainable or as mysterious as it might appear to sound to a lot of people. But in terms of the toxicology results, it certainly does impact it. That being said, they did find traces of her mood stabilizing medications. We know that she was battling bipolar disorder. We know that she had 4 medications with her because they were actually found in her room. 2 of those medications were detected in her blood as well. They did notice a minute trace of alcohol, but that could be the result of decomposition. But yeah, it's a real, it's a brain scratch. I literally named the show after this case.
She had, okay, so let's talk about where she was staying. She was in one room and then got moved because of odd behavior.
Yeah, and that was interesting to find out about because before these depositions for the wrongful death came out, we really didn't have any insight into that at all. Most people thought, first of all, that she was staying on the 4th floor of the hotel. We then learned through the court depositions, no, she was never staying on the 4th floor. She was actually staying on the 5th floor, which is a little important because in the elevator footage, she's pressing all of the buttons in the center of the console, and one of those is the 4th floor. So some people were assuming maybe she's trying to get back to her floor. We now know that wasn't part of her motivation at all. She was completely off. She was staying on the 5th floor. We didn't know that she had originally checked into a shared room. They have dormitory-style rooms there, almost like a hostel. Every hallway has like a public bathroom and a public shower area. So she was actually in a room with other people. And something else we learned from these depositions is apparently she upset these people with what was quoted as certain odd behavior. Unfortunately, we have no additional detail of what that certain odd behavior was, but it did cause the management of the hotel to move her into a private room on the 3rd day of her stay. I don't know if she actually even got to sleep in that private room. I believe that she was moved to that room the day that she disappeared. So, and we have not heard publicly from these people that witnessed this odd behavior from her. So we really have no details on what that odd behavior would be.
Yeah, that could be anything.
Yeah. I mean, you could have maybe the other people were all traveling together and maybe she was staying on the internet all night or watching videos or, I mean, it could be something more serious. Maybe she was talking to herself. Maybe she was being loud or obnoxious in some way. We really have no insight into it whatsoever. But that's really why I was hoping the court case would at least go on so that we could get some more information of that nature out because so many things were getting clarified by getting some real info on this. But unfortunately, that didn't happen.
And of course, when you look at the elevator footage, I mean, she definitely seems like she's acting odd in the elevator footage. But is it enough? Is it enough that someone would say, "Okay, we don't want her around here. She might be crazy," and what was causing her to act like that if she was on her medication?
Right, absolutely. And some people do question if she was taking her medication properly. Since only 2 of them were detected in her blood, is it possible that she was not taking the other 2 and she was having some type of adverse effect? You're really not supposed to mess around with those types of prescriptions. But I've also heard from some people that sometimes you will get a prescription that is for as needed use. So I still don't know if all 4 of those were required for her to take daily. The pill amounts were a little odd in some cases because she had more pills than the last prescription refill actually was. But that suggested to me that possibly she got refills because she knew she was going on this trip and she had just emptied her last bottle into the same bottle. I think that's why she had some strange amounts with the medication there. But people have gone into all kinds of different stuff. Was she on some type of party drug or bath salts and I've heard people that have personal experience with some of this stuff, and they say, hey, that kind of reminds me of this time this happened to me or that happened to me. But I haven't really bumped into anything compelling. And we do know that the toxicology at least returned that there were no illegal drugs in her system. That is a reason why people bring up bath salts quite a bit, because they say, I guess, that conventional tests don't always detect bath salts.
And her family pretty much said that they believe she had a psychotic break. Do you know what the reasoning behind that was?
No, and I'm honestly, this has been very tough because her family has remained extremely tight-lipped. Obviously, this is a horrible occurrence to have to face. And I'm sure that there are many regrets. I'm sure people are feeling like, why did we let her take this trip on her own? But they really have not publicly commented at all. Where I got it's a bit of an assumption, but where that came from is the court case, because their attorney was speaking on their behalf. I was literally there in the courtroom when all this went down. They weren't even there. So I don't know and I think they kind of had a heads up that the case wasn't going to go well, because the judge, for some reason, which I've never really heard of this before, was literally commenting in the press about how he was going to dismiss that case the weekend before that date happened. So the lawyer did plainly state that this is not a ghost story. This girl had a mental breakdown at this hotel. So I do believe that the family might be based on that assumption at this point, but I haven't heard it from them directly. It's been very tough because in one way, when you start looking into things like this and digging in, you really feel like you're kind of, you're encroaching on people's lives here. And yeah. I was trying to be respectful as I was going through this whole process of investigating this case. I would love the opportunity to talk to her sister. I know that her father was not happy with the autopsy findings. I would love to be able to talk to him about that. But I also know that these are people that are probably really hurt, not just by what happened to her, but they had this attempt to try to reconcile some of this with the lawsuit. They didn't even get to trial. There was basically a summary judgment, which is it was the Cecil Hotel's legal staff, and Wikipedia has this backwards, unfortunately. But the Cecil Hotel's legal staff said, we want a summary for motion judgment, where basically they were saying everything we've provided to the judge already is enough. And if the judge agrees with us, then we don't want this to go to trial at all. And that is effectively what happened, was that summary judgment was met. And the judge said, you know what, I agree with you guys. We've seen enough here. We don't need to do a full trial on this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be coming to LA anytime soon if I was in their family. I would totally understand that.
Yeah. I totally forgot what I was going to say about that. Oh, they say, well, nothing supernatural happened here. Now, I don't necessarily think that anything supernatural did happen here, but from a legal standpoint, even if you did think that, you'd have to go with look, this was just negligence on the hotel's part in order to get anywhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, you could not take that. And that's why I don't know for sure. You couldn't go into a courtroom and say, we think a ghost dragged her up there and put her in the water tank. Obviously, no judge is going to go for that. And I do believe that the legal counsel would have advised the family to, hey, this is how we have to state it, even if that's not necessarily what you guys believe. So I hope someday that the family might comment. Now that the film looks like it's pushing closer to development, there's a chance that might shake something loose on their end. I'm really not sure. But I do hope to hear from them someday about what they really think about this case.
Now, when you visited there, you obviously you checked the door, but you also played around with the elevator a little bit.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you found that there's a button that will hold the doors open for about 2 minutes.
Yes, and I also have to give credit to another YouTuber named Leprechaumunist1 who also caught on to this, and I actually met him at the court trial. We were the only two YouTubers I think that went there. Um, but yeah, there is a button that I had never really seen on an elevator before. But when you consider this is a building that was built in the 1920s and it did not have a freight elevator, and you have people that are living in this building, the button makes a bit more sense. So one of the things that's mysterious is people that watch the video say, "How come the doors aren't closing? You know, she's pressed
Right.
all these buttons for the different floors. Why aren't the doors closing?" Well, the very bottom button on that same row of buttons that she's pressing is essentially this hold elevator button. And we tested that for ourselves as we were there. We pressed the hold elevator button and then we pressed other floors above it. And as soon as you press that hold elevator button, it essentially holds the elevator for 2 full minutes. And we literally started a stopwatch on this and checked it for ourselves because we couldn't believe it. But that is, yeah, the mystery of why the elevator doors don't close, totally solved. It is odd. I still have never seen another elevator that has that same button outside of a freight elevator. Um, but yeah, it's a hold elevator button.
And can you see that she pushed it when she was pushing buttons?
It's a little tough because of the quality of the
Yeah.
footage, but it is directly in line. And you can look up pictures of the elevator panel and see it for yourself. I mean, you can see what buttons she's hitting, certainly for the 14th floor, because that's in the top center. And then as you
Hmm.
go down, you just follow the pattern down, and it's right below the buttons that are lit. Now, unfortunately, that one doesn't light up when you hit it. It's just a solid metal button. So if it did have a light, then we would obviously be able to look at the footage and say, okay, she definitely hit it because you can see it light up when she touches it. But unfortunately, it doesn't.
And that's one of the odd things about the elevator footage is that she's hitting all these floor buttons, and why?
Yeah, yeah, and that there's a kind of a strange theory around that too about something called the elevator game, where apparently if you get on an elevator, you have to be in a building that has more than 10 stories, and if you press the buttons in the right order, supposedly there is a way that it can transport you to some other type of dimension. And some people think that she hit the buttons wrong and she wound up in the water tank or something along those lines. But that's just one of the many, many theories that I've looked
Wow.
into on this. Yeah.
That's one I've never heard of.
Yeah, the elevator game. Actually, they even worked that into the Wikipedia article, which I was really surprised by. I've had
Huh.
people send me the full rules of it, and I tried to find out if it predates Elisa at all, and I really couldn't find any information to that. So I don't know if it's a piece of folklore spun up particularly to make sense of what happened to her in that case, or
Mm.
if it is something that is really has been around since before this happened to her. But there's a few weird coincidences like that when you look into this case. Even her name, Elisa Lam. There is a tuberculosis test called the Lam Elisa, and
Yeah.
there was coincidentally a huge outbreak of tuberculosis among the homeless community of Los Angeles around the same time that this is going on. So there's even a theory that, wait, was she involved in that somehow? Was she here doing some type of human trial test? And why is her name Elisa Lam? Is that a cover because she's really some type of operative or something along those lines? And then there's even a connection to a film called Dark Water,
Yep.
which was a Japanese film, and then there is an American remake of it as well. But the film came out well before this happened to Elisa, yet it features some startling elements, such as the water running dark and being foul because there is a body in the water tank in that film as well.
Yeah. And you also note that the building is essentially shaped like an E as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's weird. I will take credit for that one because I didn't hear about that from other people, but it really blew my mind when I was looking at satellite views of it. That yeah, the building is shaped like an E. I did hear from some of my viewers that that was not uncommon for buildings built around that time. Essentially, it makes more windows, and if they didn't have air conditioning, that was a nice thing to have. But yeah, it is pretty weird that that building it's essentially a giant capital E if you look at it from the top.
Now, also on your visit, you noted one difference in the elevator is there's a yellow, is it a yellow stripe on the floor when she's in the elevator and it's not there now?
Yeah, that was a bit of a strange one, and I'm still not sure. I have a theory that maybe it is either a type of rubber or carpeted mat that might have been down on the ground that had the gold border. But yeah, that certainly was not there. Also, the roof of the elevator was painted to look like the sky, and obviously in the footage we can't really tell if that's the case or not, and I don't know how recent that was. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's certainly some things to notice if you go check it out for yourself. And there have been many people, even BuzzFeed wound up sending a couple people to go to the hotel for themselves and check it out. And I know of many people that have gone to the hotel to kind of investigate it for themselves. The hotel does not permit you to go to the roof. Just know that if you go there, and I certainly don't encourage you to climb out on the fire escapes, but I have seen videos where people have certainly done that.
Well, yeah, so have I. Um, there are also, you said, cameras everywhere.
Yes, yeah, and that was really odd. I was there with this kind of investigator friend of mine, and it's the first thing he noticed as we were walking up to the hotel. He was trying to spot every camera he could on the street in the immediate area. And down there, if you consider this is kind of a former Skid Row area, there was plenty of cameras. You had ATMs, of course, they would have cameras right above them. Pretty much every street corner had cameras. And then when we got to the front of the hotel, I was really surprised because there was at least five cameras just at the entrance to the hotel. And then as you go inside, there are cameras all the way down the hallway as you go towards the desk. And some of those cameras actually looked new. There was older ones that looked like, kind of those big domes, just a big dark dome. There was a lot of
Yeah.
those all over the hotel. But the newer ones I could see had an infrared ring around them as well, and a little red light that was actually on. So I don't know if they have upgraded their camera system since this happened and added the new ones. But we did find out, once again, through information from the lawsuit, that police actually do have more footage of Elisa that has not been released of her that night. And one of them is her coming into the hotel with two men. And supposedly, these two men hand her a box. Now, we have no idea what the box is. We have no idea who the two men are, and we don't know what this exchange is about whatsoever. It could be
Hmm.
something as simple as leftover food from them being out at dinner.
Sure.
Uh, I mean, who knows? But I'd be very curious to see if that video would ever be released or surface, because I think that would give us much more to analyze about maybe, if nothing else, her state of mind that night. Maybe from the box we could tell, was she at a local restaurant? Is there drinks available there? There's a lot of information we could probably get out of that. Not to mention the two men. I don't know if they were interviewed about what happened to her. Um, if she's such a problem to her roommates, how is she striking up, a couple of people that are now seen entering the hotel with her? Are those friends of hers? Did she know them from online before her trip? There are just so many questions.
And did they leave after they handed her the box?
I don't know for certain. I don't know for certain.
Huh.
But obviously, we know that by the time we get to the elevator footage, she's certainly alone. I don't know if she's in the same clothes. It appears to me that the clothing she's wearing in the elevator footage is possibly pajamas. She's wearing a men's medium shorts. She's wearing a shirt, I think, for a beer company, if I remember correctly, and a red sweater, like a hoodie sweater. So I have a feeling that possibly they came back with her from wherever they were. She might have gone to change, like she was getting ready for bed, and then for some reason went exploring the hotel.
I mean, it could also be that she was talking to someone outside the elevator.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I still can't cut that out, and it's hard because being there, if you look out to the right, basically the direction that she's looking, you're looking directly at the door for the public bathroom and the public showers. And it occurs to me, with some of her mannerisms, is it possibly someone talking to her from the bathroom? Is someone being lewd in some way up there? I really don't know. But there's not a whole lot of space. Pretty much, you get out of the elevator, you turn in that direction, and you're going to run right into the bathroom.
It could be, or maybe, I mean, some of her responses or some of the way she's moving almost seem playful at times.
Yeah. There is an analysis that was done by a body language expert. And yeah, they do think that it looks like she's being playful. It seems like she is preening her hair in a few spots where maybe she's possibly being flirtatious with someone. And that's why I called out the mirror earlier. I don't know if she's looking in the mirror at some point, doing some of that. It's kind of hard to tell, but yeah, it does. There is a playful nature, at least from the way I view it, that begins after she initially gets in. It almost looks like she's playing hide or seek, and then she does a weird thing where she kind of steps towards the door and then jumps outside of it, like almost like if you were going to scare somebody. So yeah, I certainly agree with that. There's definitely a playfulness going on there.
And what if that's it? What if she was playing hide and seek with someone and decided, hey, maybe I'll hide on top of this water tower?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you can't rule it out.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is none of it totally makes sense. Like, we don't have all the pieces.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely feel like that. I really wish that I don't know if the family would have any mechanism for doing this legally, but I do wish that there was some way that the police records could be opened on this and released on this. If it was more of a threat to the public, which the court case might have, helped with, if, for example, the water tower was found to indeed be a dangerous spot, if the hotel was found liable for that, maybe there would have been some type of legs to stand on to get some of that information released. But from what I've looked at, getting records like that is very tough. It's basically impossible if you're not part of the family, because they see it as a private issue, particularly if it's related to a suicide. They see that as a private issue, and that will typically not be released to anyone outside of family members.
It doesn't seem like a logical way to commit suicide. Now,
No,
not that suicide is necessarily logical, but as you said earlier, she could have just jumped off the roof.
Yeah, and you have some other things that work against the suicide theory. First of all, just consider the mentality of, this is someone going on a trip. She was expected to get to Santa Cruz at some point in this trip. She was doing things that she wanted to do. She was, going to the zoo. I believe she went to a television show taping. She was really trying to enjoy her time out there. Now, yeah, admittedly, who knows the state of mind that it takes for someone to make that decision to do something like that to themselves. But we also know that earlier that same day, she went to a local bookstore called The Last Bookstore, and the manager there interacted with her directly, said she seemed very nice. She was concerned about some of the things that she was buying because they were gifts for family members, and she wasn't sure if she was going to be able to fit them on the plane. So you had her talking earlier in that day and buying gifts for her family. Obviously, we don't have a suicide note, at least nothing that's been released publicly or even a hint of. The only thing that's a little strange around that is we have heard of a postcard that was mailed, I believe, to a cousin of hers that gave them some concern, but they won't tell us the contents of that postcard.
Yeah, so that doesn't really help.
Right.
I think it's important to kind of rule out the supernatural stuff until there's a point where you simply cannot explain it in any other way.
Yeah, I agree, and that's largely the approach that I took. In my videos, I still want to pay respect to the ideas that I could see were popular by at least mentioning them. That's why I know about the elevator game and some of the other stuff like that. But And that's honestly part of the reason I had trouble with LAPD's position of coming to a very kind of hard and fast conclusion about this not being foul play. It's so odd to me that you guys can't tell me how she got into the tank. You find no trace evidence. You can't explain that the tank is open when you're actually searching the roof and you miss it somehow. She's found with her clothes off. It sounds almost like it was some type of a sexual attack, but we do know that from the autopsy they at least collected a rape kit. We don't know if they processed it. I know that Los Angeles has had some issues with collecting rape kits and then not processing them. They've been backlogged with like hundreds of requests. So is there, but I believe the autopsy would have also shown, possibly upon visual inspection, that might have happened as well. They did not note anything like that. So it's kind of frustrating because it's so wide open. There are so many possibilities for what could have happened. I don't know how you come to the conclusion right off the bat that no one else was influencing this. You know, what if someone led her to the rooftop by gunpoint and said, "You do this, get up on top of that tank, get in the tank," and then threw in everything after her? I think it's still feasible.
Yeah, I would say the only thing that we would have to explain then is the dog's not picking up her scent.
Yeah, and that is a huge mind boggle for me. I between that and not finding any type of fingerprints for her path to actually get to a location up above the tank or on top of the tank, that's really, really tough.
I mean, unless someone knew how to clean that stuff off.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't rule that out either. I mean, I've even considered possibilities of, did she die somewhere else in the building? Was she moved to that location to hide it? There's all kinds of different ways. And if you separate the act of her dying from her being found in the water tank, then all of a sudden that starts this other floodgate of things to chase down. I looked into the owners of the building, who coincidentally, around the time that this was going on, there was kind of this managing partner, and he struck this deal to work with one of the largest commercial real estate management companies in the nation. And all of that happened literally within a day of her body being found. So even that brought me to think, well, is it possible that they found her dead and he didn't want that to come out because it was going to shake up that deal for him in some way? So, you know, he had a staff member hide the body somewhere. And then there has also been another change in ownership that has happened since all this, which was a completely private sale. I can't tell when that was going on. And if I knew the timing of that, that could even open up another theory. Once again, were they possibly hiding this body because there was a pending transaction of this multi-million-dollar hotel going on?
And like, I realize people like to, they see saying like this, it looks creepy, they want to jump to a supernatural explanation, but we also got to realize that although there are definitely some weird things out there, I'm not saying that there aren't what we would consider to be supernatural things that happen. I don't think it should ever be our first step, because we can't really prove anything. Like when it comes to the supernatural, we can't definitively prove any of it at this point.
Yeah,
we can prove we can prove people have experiences, but we can't prove what they are. And so to take something like that as fact and then use it to explain what might be a more mundane thing just because it looks weird, I think is the wrong path to take on this.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously, and this is one of the things that's toughest about my episodes of Brainscratch, I'm trying to find the best evidence that I can, things that we can actually say, we know that these clothes were here. We know that this person saw her there. And then trying to build up from that information. When you start looking at supernatural theories, the evidence to build up from is usually, it's in some cases it's non-existent. In other cases, it's tenuous at best. For example, like the elevator game. We know that she was pressing buttons in an elevator. That means she was playing the elevator game. Well, that's a bit of a jump. There's a lot of people that press buttons in an elevator every single day, and they're not playing the elevator game. So But you make a really good point. I think what's important is to still remain open to those possibilities, to still at least let people know that they're being discussed, because
Yes.
then you hear back, particularly, and that's why I love YouTube. I love it as a format because it is not a one-way conversation like television is. It is truly the start of a conversation. And if you go into the comments, you'll see that it continues. And you can get such valuable insight by considering the opinions of your viewers and seeing what they think about those theories as well. And
Yes.
maybe sometimes those theories that are supernatural might lead you in a direction that is very tangible. So I don't think you want to rule them out. I think you look at them with a very critical eye and you try to find the evidence and find the story that fits the evidence.
Yes. Yes. And like I said, I think the creep factor of the video automatically, threw out those conspiracy ideas and those supernatural ideas. And, in the end, maybe one of them is right, but it seems like there's a lot here that we don't have all the pieces to, so it's really hard to pin together.
Yeah, and you raise a point, and it's weird because it almost brings us back full circle to the start of the conversation. Why is that footage so creepy? Why was it
Yeah.
released in a state where there could be so many questions asked about it? Literally, the entire point of it being released could be questioned. Um, and yeah, why is it slowed down? Why is the time code obstructed? Why has it been seemingly edited? There are so many questions. It all comes back to that footage. And I think that's why this is such a popular thing. I think that's why this isn't going anywhere. As this movie goes through production and gets released, I think we're going to see a huge surge in people looking into that video again. I had this feeling when I first came across that video, like, could I watch this video and find out the truth? Is there something in this video that will tell us what happened to this girl? Because we know these are some moments leading up to the end of her life. It has to be in this video. I can tell you at this point, I don't know if those answers are in that video, but I know people are going to keep looking for it.
Yeah. And in the end, that video may have nothing at all to do with anything that happened to her.
Yeah, it could be hours before she winds up in that water tank. I really have no idea of the time frame.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Which, we don't know, because why would they remove the time code?
Right, right. Well, and we even have an idea about the times that it could be. Most people think that it is close to midnight because it seems like the date indicator is changing at some point. Other people say no, it's more like at 8 o'clock at night. But we don't know the other side of that equation, which is when does she get into the tank? The best estimation we have there is from the coroner's report, which just says, hey, this looks like a body that's been in water for a couple weeks. So
Right.
when you get down to actually looking at the hours and what goes on, I mean, did she go into that tank 5 minutes after that footage, or 4 hours, or 8 hours after that footage? We really have no idea.
So I guess the things we can say is she doesn't seem to have been in a suicidal state of mind prior to this incident.
Right.
There was definitely some odd behavior noticed. What
Yep.
that was, we don't know. She definitely had a clear path to the roof, either
Yeah.
via the fire escapes or the door, which alarm seems not to work.
Yeah.
We don't know why the canines wouldn't have detected her scent. We don't know why she would have climbed by herself onto the water towers, because it doesn't seem like it was an easy thing to do, but not
Right.
impossible either.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't know why she would have jumped fully clothed with everything, her watch and everything else into the water tank, only to take her clothes off while she was in there.
Right.
So, and even if someone had thrown her in there, I mean, they would have had to throw the clothes in afterwards. I mean, again, why would you take your clothes off after you're already in the water tank and wet?
Yeah, and even some people have suggested, was she trying to use her clothing to make some type of rope, or was she trying to use her clothing to clog up some of the pipes that were, maybe there was, because it's a refillable system. As water gets
Right.
used in the hotel, it empties, and then there is a pipe system from the basement that comes up and refills it. Was she potentially trying to clog one of the pipes that feeds water into it? Unfortunately, we don't know. And even the question of what was blocking up the pipe so that the hotel guests noticed, because obviously it seems like she was in there for a few weeks. But when the maintenance worker finds her, she is floating face up near the top. So I can't even answer what was blocking the water flow. I'm thinking it might have been clothing of hers, but I really don't know.
That is a very good point, because her body obviously wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
Has anything else come up since you did your last video on this, other than the two men there in the video?
No. The two men is really the biggest thing, outside of now that it looks like the movie is kind of getting on track since they're attaching a star to it. I think that's a pretty good sign that that thing's going to go into production. But in terms of the actual case or investigation, unfortunately, there's no more information to review. Everyone is remaining tight-lipped on it, and I've already reviewed all the legal information that came out during the very short trial that happened. So it's a mystery.
If you had to make a guess, a gut instinct here, what do you think happened to her?
You know, I'm caught between the thought of her body being hidden for some reason. There's something about that really nags at me, because you are talking about a lot of money in this case. And if you look at the court documentation about how they notified people when they found her, it was like the maintenance worker told his boss told the general manager of the hotel, and then I would assume the general manager of the hotel might have contacted the owner before contacting the police. But you can already see there's a chain of command about how this information is going. It's not the maintenance worker that calls the cops and say, we found a body up here. So does that chain keep going? Is it the general manager that calls LAPD out? I really have no idea. But outside of that, I think we do have to consider some type of mental breakdown. As a matter of fact, the last video that I made is a bit of a tribute to at least her struggle with bipolar depression. I went through all of her social media and gathered up a lot of phrases that she had written about her struggle, and did essentially this video where you see you're kind of walking the streets with her as these phrases are being read about her struggling with her fight with depression. So it's possible. I don't want that to be the answer, but I think that we have to consider that maybe something went wrong with her medication. Maybe she thought that she was doing something else up there and didn't even realize what was really happening.
All right. Well, again, where can people find your stuff on YouTube?
The easiest way is to search Brainscratch, or if you remember, I am Lordan Arts, LordanArts, and that's also my Twitter handle, and I also have a website at LordanArts.com. But if you just remember the term Brainscratch and search on Brainscratch, or if you search on Elisa Lam, there's a very good chance that you're going to see my videos pop up there. I do new episodes every single week. I don't even know how many episodes I have at this point, but I'm always looking into different cases. And of course, Searchlight is also a bit of a passion project for me. The missing people profiles, where that's turned into its own thing, because now I have people that are coming to me about family members that are missing, and it's much more frequent that I'm not just doing web research and presenting that. Now I'm actually talking to people that are directly affected and presenting their stories as well.
Oh, that's awesome, because that's one way you can actually help these people.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I meet some extremely strong and motivating people through that. It's pretty amazing to me to see what these people do to keep attention raised to their missing loved ones, and I'm happy to be a part of that and help them do that.
All right, well, thank you, John.
You got it, Soraya. Thank you so much for your time. I know my audience loves your show. Really appreciate you having me on.